Welcome to episode 92 of Broad Street Hustle. I am your very special and probably one-time only guest host, Jimmy the Chalk, out of my normal sidekick role. As you might have heard by the music, we're doing something a little different this week as we're down a couple guys. So when there's a crisis, you send in the clowns. So I'll be hosting this week. We are down with Jason and Tommy, not available this week, but it is still the Gruesome Twosome going to be with you this week. So joining me for what will, without any doubt, be the most intelligent episode of the first 92 is Christopher Michael Meeker. Meeker, how's it going?
What's up, Jimmy the Chalk? They're on the pup list this week.
Yeah,
I guess I just learned that that's like, hearing that Embiid's not going to play like an hour before the Denver game. So an hour before airtime tonight, we get the news that Tommy and Jason will not be able to make it to the show. So I guess we're going to have to carry the load here tonight.
yeah. I guess we'll have to be Beverly and Oubre. I don't know. We'll get to the Sixers a little later, but anyway, so kicking off episode 92. It'll be a shorter episode than normal because as much information and as I said, intelligent conversation you'll get, there's only two of us, so we'll keep it brief. But anyway, we're going to cover the Eagles bringing in Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator, who was somebody who was not necessarily on the radar when we spoke last week. We'll get into the championship games and then talk about what was a bad week for the Sixers. Bad week for a lot of Philadelphia teams when you get the Flyers situation rolled into it too. But anyway, not the best. But let's get right into Kellen Moore. So Kellen Moore hired as the offensive coordinator for the Eagles. Spent a couple years in Dallas, and then went out to, I almost said San Diego again, Los Angeles this year for the Chargers. And obviously, those of you listening to our season preview, there's three of us that were kind of excited by that, or at least excited by the Chargers prospects with him running the offense out there. That obviously fell well short for various reasons. And with Jim Harbaugh coming in, he had the options to interview elsewhere. And so he did get an interview with the Eagles and was offered and accepted the job of offensive coordinator. So it'll be the third coordinator in 3 years now coming in and play calling with this offense and with Jalen Hurts. So we'll start it right off with Meeker. What are your immediate thoughts on the Kellen Moore hiring?
Well, like you said, I mean, I didn't think the Eagles thought he'd be available, but as soon as the Chargers ended up hiring Harbaugh, we knew he was going to become available. Saw some comments that Sirianni says that he will be in charge of the offense. Not that Sirianni is not going to have some say in what goes on with the offense, but it seems like he's going to be play calling and he's going to be the guy. And it would seem like if you had a choice between him or Cliff Kingsbury, which I know was on their radar as well, that he's probably a better choice. Now, as you had said, pretty impressive run after Dak came back from injury with Dak, right? I think he did a pretty good job. The Cowboys were top 10 in a lot of offensive metrics when he was their offensive coordinator. Goes to LA, and as you said, we all thought that might have been a good hire. Didn't end up that way. But, when you really look at it, Herbert, I don't say Herbert, but the Chargers had a lot of injuries with their skill position players throughout the year. Herbert didn't really take a step forward, maybe given the fact that he had a lot of injuries on offense. So I don't know that it was an impressive showing in LA. But the one knock on Moore was, I guess, when he was vacating Dallas, is that McCarthy kind of threw him under the bus a little bit about how the team performed offensively in the playoffs for those 2 years. And didn't turn out that it worked too well for him anyway in the playoffs this year, right? So one of the things that, we know about him is that one of the things that he does that the Eagles do not do is he runs a lot of motion. The Eagles were last in the NFL with running motion. So I think what we're going to see here is a little bit of a meshing of what Sirianni's scheme is and what Kellen Moore likes to do. And they'll kind of combine that into an offense for this year. And, so his job will certainly be working with Hurts and, getting him to buy in to what will probably be taking everything, like I said, it seemed to work for the Eagles in 2022 when they were successful, and what worked for Kellen Moore when he was in Dallas. I wonder if they hired him because he's familiar with Dallas's offensive scheme, and if they feel like that's some sort of strategy they can use when they play the Cowboys twice a year. The good thing about him, obviously, is that he's been a play caller, he's experienced, he's been a quarterback in the NFL. And I think that he probably would have gotten a sniff at coaching the Chargers if they didn't hire Harbaugh and went the way of hiring internally. Um, Another thing he does is they work under center um, in his offense. And that's not something that I've seen the Eagles do maybe a handful of times the entire year. If they're doing the tush push, you're under center, but otherwise, they're not really under center. So we'll see if he can get Hurts to buy into that type of offense as well. But I think, look, I mean, he came available, and the Eagles pounced right away, which I think they had to do because who knows, like after the dust settles with all of these new coaches, if someone wanted to bring him in somewhere else. So I think the Eagles, were aggressive, saw that they had an opportunity, wanted to grab him, and that's what they did. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when we were talking about last week, it wasn't anybody we mentioned, and it didn't seem like a guy that was necessarily going to be on their radar, but it was more of who was going to be out there. And so I am optimistic, I guess, with the hiring, because I don't know if there was a more known commodity out there. I mean, you could say Kingsbury, but he's, I would take more. I mean, Kingsbury might be a little more creative, but he's also had some flops at the NFL level as well. The interesting thing with Moore is I feel like a one year it's a 1-year job. And then you would think the organization kind of
Yeah,
knows that, because it's like if the Eagles get back to the Super Bowl or even are outstanding, let's say, or much improved, he was a guy a year ago was talked about. He was, future head coaching potential. Wasn't really interviewed for much this year because of the setbacks with the Chargers, which again, I didn't get to see a ton of Chargers games, but they had a lot of injuries. As you mentioned, Herbert eventually got hurt towards the latter half of the year and was out for the season. But he was missing receivers almost every game. They were maybe healthy for the first game. They put up 30 something in the loss to the Dolphins. And then that whole situation with the head coach, just the team fell apart. And you
yeah.
kind of knew by halfway through the year that it just wasn't going to happen. So there's a lot of other,
Yeah, and more of a functionality of
yeah,
Staley,
absolutely.
than him.
Well, certainly
Yeah.
hope so. As an Eagles fan, you hope that's kind of, because the offensive ratings this year, it's kind of like in that middle third of the league, sort of near the bottom of that tier. But again, if they have a performance similar to what they did, even if you don't go Super Bowl, but say put up numbers as similar to when Steichen was here, he's going to be a head coaching candidate and might get a job somewhere else next year. Likewise, if the Eagles bottom out next year, the whole staff is probably gone because Sirianni probably won't get another year at that point. So this is like a make it or break it year for kind of everybody involved. And so bringing him in, it's like, okay, he's obviously very well thought of. And, when Dak was healthy in Dallas, his offenses were top 10, top 5 in a lot of metrics. And people say this year, well, this was Dak's best year ever. I mean, some measurements, certainly with fewer turnovers, I think, or he threw a lot of interceptions last year. But, especially last year, the games where Dak wasn't playing, they didn't finish overall very high or as high as they could have, but that was because Dak missed those handful of games towards the beginning of the season. And I forget who the kid was. I was going to say DiNucci, but he was the quarterback in 2020 that made DeVito, look like Roger Staubach because he couldn't throw the ball forward, let alone run with the ball like at least DeVito could do. Not to lump all of our Italian friends in the same group, but anyway. Nonetheless, none of them were Dan Marino, but it was, so that was a lost year, so the years where he had Dak for the full year, whatever you think of Dak, they were a top, I think, 5 offense. And then take the portion of last year, Dak turned the ball over a lot, but they also scored a lot of points and they were a winning team. At the end of the year, they actually got a playoff win last year. Right. And then they played San Francisco tough that whole game and, came up short. So The difference is you mentioned the motion. That's probably one of the bigger ones. And he didn't use a ton of. He was top 10, I think, in motion this year with the Chargers. And Eagles were
Yeah.
down at the bottom, so you can't go anywhere but up, really. So it'll be interesting to see how he incorporates that possibly. And under center, even if you only run a little bit of it, it's a different look. So if you can have even a small package of plays, and I get obviously that there's a reason why they do it, but when you are handing off to a back that's kind of standing still on these 5-6 yards in the backfield, as opposed to a guy that's got a little momentum going, look,
Yeah.
they've been successful in those situations, but not so much this year where they were getting 3 and outs and not as effective in other ways. So it'll be interesting to see. And then, of course, if Kelsey all retires, as we assume he will, the offensive line will look different, and Statland will be here. But Statland's been here with everybody, so he can kind of gel, I think, with whatever coordinator or scheme they bring in here. But it'll be interesting to see if the offensive line does have a little bit of a different look, with, I guess, Jurgens moving to center,
To center.
how that and whoever comes in at right guard at that point, if that will change a little bit, because Jurgens is athletic, but he's not Kelsey, like downfield running. There's just Kelsey's the prototypical center that you want, but he's one of a kind too. So we'll have to see how that gets into it. But just one last thing I'll say, and then if you have anything you want to follow up with, AJ Brown and Devontae Smith were interviewed yesterday, and they were very defensive of Sirianni, very much supportive, and they were like, our message to the new offense coordinator is, run plays that will get us the ball. So obviously there's still a narrative of the play calling wasn't what the receivers wanted to see, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And then hopefully, some of Hurts' decisions that weren't as good can either be, eliminated or at least masked better with maybe some different schemes. But I'll give you the final word on it.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you said that, because when I heard an analyst compare the styles of a Kingsbury versus a Moore, Moore is a schemer. Like, he schemes wide receivers open. So wide receivers love his offensive play calling. And Kingsbury's more of a matchup type offensive mind. So given the talent the talent that they have on this team at wideout, especially, I think it's a good fit if he brings that type of style here, and if they can get back to using Hurts in the running game, which we have said all year that they weren't able to do, and that's when the offense really started to struggle. It could be the best of all worlds. So I'm wondering if we're going to make some other personnel changes other than just the DC and OC. Like, didn't a couple guys get axed already? I'm trying to remember. Was it the wide receivers coach and some other
Quarterbacks coach is definitely going. Wide receivers coach, I'm not 100% sure. Defense, a lot of the position coaches are getting rolled over. And Fangio's bringing in guys that he has a familiarity with to work that. But it'll be interesting to see. And you mentioned receivers. There's people that aren't necessarily connected to the team keep talking about, are the Eagles going to trade AJ Brown? Like, I don't know. Famous last words: zero chance AJ Brown gets traded. Number one, because he's one of the better receivers in the league, and number two, the cap implications on a team that now has to find creative ways to use money with Hurts' new contract kicking in. I mean, look, hey, Packers had the biggest dead cap numbers in history this year and almost got to the championship game. I'm not going to. It's possible, but I'm not confident enough that the Eagles can put that kind of team together. I can't see, unless you're going to send us Mahomes and somebody else. I don't see who they're trading AJ Brown for, unless it's like for the number 3 pick so they can draft Marvin Harrison Jr. or something. I don't see how that's even feasible. But I guess some people are trying to find something to talk about. But
no, look at CD. Well, CD Lamb obviously had a great year this year without Kellen Moore.
yeah.
But he coached him up during his rookie season, and Gallup turned into probably a better player than we thought he could have been. So it's a wide receiver friendly offense, which makes it a quarterback friendly offense too, obviously. So we'll see. It's just tainted. It's tainted from last year. Last year's debacle with the Chargers. We really don't know, how much of a step forward Herbert might have been able to take with having his talent on the field. And, obviously he didn't. And you might look at the hire and say, well, the Chargers they took a step backwards. But when you really look into it in depth, you would see that that was the reason for that was mainly the injuries. So anyway, and a bad coach,
Yeah,
horrible coach.
horrible coach.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, so I mentioned the reigning MVP, Mr. Mahomes. So we'll get into the championship games. Um, we'll go in order. So the first game, the reigning MVP played the presumptive MVP. You and I were both picking Baltimore to win. Tommy and Jason both picked Kansas City. So of course we ended up wrong, but Kansas City wins to go to Mahomes' fourth Super Bowl in 5 years. I think it is, right? Is that
This is his
fourth in 5 years,
yeah.
and fourth in the 6 years that he's been in the championship game all 6 years as a starter, but his fourth Super Bowl appearance now. So I'll throw it back to you, Meeker, for thoughts, impressions from the game.
Yeah. Well, I said in last week's podcast that I thought in order for Kansas City to win this game, Mahomes was going to have to play an otherworldly game. That was my words. And I wouldn't say he did that, but he played well enough, and especially in the first half to win. And they controlled the second half just enough. They controlled the game just enough in the second half to win. He played mistake-free football. On the flip side, if we're on the subject of quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson did nothing to dispel his reputation that he does not perform when it counts. And, he didn't play his game, and the entire offensive game plan looked pretty terrible. I think Spagnuolo deserves a lot of credit for the defensive scheme that he placed in this game. They brought pressure with 6, sometimes 7 guys and manned up on the receivers, and they realistically only had that one play to Zay Flowers, that was busted coverage that burned them all game. Other than that, I mean, there was no real big plays coming from Jackson's arm. Then, of course, the Ravens fumble at the goal line, and that just tore them apart, which is a little bit of karma because, the couple plays before that, he had the taunting penalty on Snead. You go back 15 yards, which was a completely stupid penalty. And he's the same guy that causes the fumble, right? So karma will bite you in the ass sometimes. But I want to take a look at a few numbers that decided this game, and we can kind of discuss that a little bit. And some of them are kind of unexpected. This one probably is the biggest one, and that's 3. 3 Raven turnovers, and 2 of them extremely costly, with the fumble at the end zone with Flowers, and of course the interception into triple coverage, both of which, if they score on either play, obviously puts the game within reach, or even, gives the Ravens a shot of winning this game. And look, we've said it a million times. You win the turnover battle, more often than not, you're going to win the game. And these were some really costly turnovers that I think were the biggest reason why they lost.
Yeah, I mean, you lose a conference championship game, the turnover battle 3-0. I mean, I don't know that it's never happened where a team has won, with a negative differential 3 in a conference championship game, but it's pretty rare if it has ever happened. And, they actually got lucky. I mean, it was a good defensive stand, but the first turnover was the Jackson fumble that put Kansas City in scoring range, and they ended up going for it on fourth down, didn't make it. They take the field goal there, as I'm sure we'll talk about in the next game. Wouldn't have made it it was already, or no, they didn't have 17 yet, I don't think. I forget. But anyway, it wouldn't have made it an extra score, I don't think. So they can see going for it in that situation, that aggressiveness. But so, it really, at the watching the game, Baltimore goes, it's 3 and out, I think, the first drive. Kansas City long drive touchdown. Baltimore comes back, gets a big play, gets a touchdown. Okay, they're in this. Kansas City comes back, long drive touchdown. I'm like, all right. So in my head, I'm like,
9 minutes.
yeah,
By the way,
they're like, I'm like, okay, so this is going to be. I'm like, if Baltimore's defense doesn't come to play, this game is over, just because Jackson's not going to win a shootout against Kansas City. So, and give the Baltimore defense credit, they only let up 3 points the rest of the game after that. And if you would have said ahead of the game, Kansas City's only going to get 17, you got to feel pretty good if you're Baltimore in those chances because you think you should be able to probably get to 20, all things considered. But it completely flipped, and the Kansas City didn't turn the ball over, and they ran time off the clock, and Baltimore just I forget what the stats were at halftime, but Jackson had like 3 completions and one was to himself, before halftime. So the offense was just not moving. Their play calling was getting
Yeah.
killed on social media. Um, and I mean, just for me, I picked Baltimore, but even when Flowers hit the big play and they're driving, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, even if they score here, like, I don't feel like they're going to win the game. Like, I'm like, oh, they're back in it. Now you feel good. It just didn't feel like they were down there, obviously, with a chance, but it didn't feel like that they were in the game necessarily. And then, of course, that fumble, um, I mean, they had a couple other chances, but that fumble really just killed it. And, like you said, Snead comes back and makes a great play after getting nearly burned for the touchdown. And it's, the Chiefs are back again, and Jackson is going to have another year of can he really win the big one? Because it'd been one thing if he played a game similar to Hurts in the Super Bowl where he would say, look, they didn't win, but man, you can't fault the quarterback. He's going to take and has been taking a lot of the heat for the lack of success that the offense had in that game.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll talk about some other numbers. And the other one is five personal foul calls. Five. In an AFC championship game that ended up costing the Ravens defense from getting off the field a few times when they were down and needed to get the offense back on the field, causing a 37-minute to 23-minute time of possession. Again, mistakes, right? We talked about it all the time about how the team that makes less mistakes is going to win the game. You have 3 turnovers, you have 5 personal foul calls in the game, including that stupid taunting penalty, which, you know, I don't know. Look, it's revisionist history to say, well, if the taunting penalty doesn't happen, maybe they call different plays at that time of the game. I don't know. You can't say, well, he would have fumbled anyway. I mean, can't say that, obviously. But that was big. 8, that's my next number. 8 rushes by Baltimore running backs in the game. I think that's insane. They average rushing with running backs over 20 times a game in the regular season, or even up to this game. So Monken didn't have a good game plan to get to play like a Ravens style game, and they relied too heavily on Lamar Jackson or Lamar Jackson's arm, and he did not do what he needed to do with his arm or his legs to get the offense moving. And that's another thing. Like the only play I can remember that they called a design run was on that 4th down where he ended up running for like 25
Mhm.
yards. So the one call that they made that they were successful on with Jackson running, they never really went back to it the entire game. And I don't know if it was because the way that Spagnuolo was scheming, or I just don't know if they were like Monken's whole philosophy was okay, because the Ravens play from ahead a lot, and this was a game that they were behind and they weren't behind big, but it seemed like he was panicking. Like there was like panic play calling going on and they wanted pass, pass, pass. And what was happening? A lot of balls getting batted down by the defensive line. A lot of passes defended. They played great. The defense played great the whole game. And I just think that they just got out of their whole habitual style of offense by not running the ball. I mean, they are a running football team. They only rely on Jackson to make plays with his arm, in situations where you have to rely on it, I guess you could say. But they weren't ever out of the game where they felt like they had to go to the passing game exclusively, especially in the second half, and they just abandoned the run. Don't understand that, you know? Another one, 11 catches by Travis Kelsey. They couldn't scheme the defense to stop him. Like he was open all over the field. And, that's going to kill you too. That's going to destroy you if you get 11 catches from a tight end. So, and we know Kelsey's great. He's a Hall of Famer. But 11 catches? Like, again, you're not going to win that game. 76. That was Mahomes' completion percentage. He threw 40 times or 41 times. He completed 30 passes. And that showed you why he's the best in the
I mean,
game.
he made
You
it.
know,
He
this
he was like 12 for 12 or 13 or something to start the game. Like
right game.
yeah.
Yep.
I mean, those first two drives, he didn't, and I think into the third drive, he didn't throw an incompletion. And
Yeah. And look, I mean, that's all the scoring basically that they had, was when he was extremely hot in the first half. And despite scoring 0 points in the second half, that 17 ended up holding up. And, along those lines, the Ravens defense overall played a good game. They put the team, I think they put the team in a position to come back and win the game, but they obviously couldn't figure out the pressure. Spags was dialing up and made mistakes in the huge spots. In the game, Lamar didn't opt to run if nothing was there. And, like I was saying, batted down passes, defended passes, empty downs after down, putting themselves in third and long a lot. And now they're going home. And the way they played and coached, and Harbaugh has to take some heat on this just as much as Lamar. They deserve to lose. And Casey goes on to play another Super Bowl, and Lamar is riddled with another year of not coming up big when it was on the line. So, there was a couple of analysts that were talking before the playoffs even started, like before the wild card round, said that people the two individuals that were under the most pressure going into this playoffs was Lamar Jackson to dispel that reputation and Shanahan. Of course, we're going to be talking about that game next, but Shanahan winning a Super Bowl. Couldn't agree more.
yeah, and I mean, I mentioned it, and you mentioned it. So the defense in the end, if I would say they did their job. The one knock I would say is that, and I think Jason might have spoke about this last week. Because Kansas City got those points early, it did put they put them in a hole. They're down 17-7, and so I think while they kept them in the game after that, if those other points come later in the game and it's maybe a closer score. I mean, it almost seemed like there was a sense of panic in some ways on Baltimore's offense because they kind of didn't know what to do. And listen, give Spagnuolo credit. I mean, he's a championship coordinator. I think, a lot of people remember his stint with the Rams that didn't go so well, and that's kind of, hung over him. But I mean, his credentials as a defensive coordinator are top notch. And he found a way to, confuse them at the very least. And even, Lamar was able to make some plays where he kept the play alive and then got a guy open and made a throw. But there was a couple other plays where he did that, but then he just wasn't seeing that, there's a guy open downfield that could have went for, 40 or 50 yards, and he just didn't see it, and he was throwing it away or trying to check it down, or he just, and then I guess it was the last interception where, I mean, if there wasn't triple coverage and it was only the guy was in double coverage and put his hand up and asked for the ball, and he even if
Yeah.
if it's only double coverage, you need the absolute most perfect throw for him to even have a chance to catch it inbounds for a touchdown the way they were covering him. So he threw it.
There wasn't a lot of space. I mean,
No.
he's halfway in the end zone when he's asking
Yeah,
for the ball
and
and still running.
so underthrown on top of that. I know he got bumped, but he wasn't making that catch. So and that ended up being really the nail in the coffin. Although the fumble was really what did it in, but yeah. So another disappointing year for Lamar in terms of not getting to the Super Bowl. Ravens defensive coordinator got the Seahawks job to surprise of some. It
Yeah.
seemed like Dan Quinn was going to get that job. He obviously ended up today with Washington after the Lions offensive coordinator took his name out of the running. So they'll have some.
Surprised by that? You surprised by that?
I was a little bit because it seemed like he was the guy from the start, Johnson, going to Washington. So, and people are like, well, why would you want to go there? Well, you have a new owner. You have the number 2 pick in the draft, I think. So you can draft a.
Is New England score? New two.
I
Yeah,
think
so
they're
it's
2 New England's 3. I
okay.
think. So high pick. You can draft your quarterback. It's not going to get. I mean, maybe there's a better job that opens next year, I guess. But you have kind of like a new regime coming in there, and it's one of the more higher profile jobs in the league for sure. One of the most valuable franchises in terms of worth. So I was kind of surprised. So I don't know. I don't know what the thinking was there. Obviously, I'm sure he got a raise to stay in Detroit. Maybe he felt a loyalty of the way that game ended, that he wanted to hang around and see if they can get it done there. But yeah, that did surprise me, and it very much. I wasn't so much surprised that Seattle didn't go with Quinn because I thought if they really wanted him, they would have made that signing already. Quinn ending up in Washington did surprise me. I did not see that one coming as the move today, especially after coming off a defensive coach like Rivera. I thought they would definitely want to go offense with somebody drafting a quarterback, and they did not. So yeah, that was surprising to me.
Well, I mean, I think probably the biggest surprise is that Belichick does not have a job.
I would have thought he would have been a potential candidate again for Washington with Johnson taking his name out, but yeah, they obviously were not interested. So unless Andy Reid wins another Super Bowl and decides to step down, Belichick may not have any openings this year, and even then, I don't think he's going to get the Kansas City job if it becomes available. But we mentioned the Detroit coordinators. So let's get into the second game. Detroit gets into the half up 24-7, and San Francisco offense looked very similar to it as it did the week before, only put up 7 points on the board. Detroit did what Green Bay did not, which was get the ball in the end zone a bunch of times. They get they hold on to an interception with Purdy and gets points on the board with that. So it's 24-7. Everything looks like it's rolling Detroit's way, and then come out in the second half and they can't handle and hold on to the ball for the life of them in some of the key plays. But I'll kick it to you to get into your thoughts and see if you have any interesting numbers from this game.
Yeah, I didn't do the interesting numbers. I'll just say a couple of things. So I thought this game would have been close because I had said last week that I thought it was going to be a 1-point game. It ended up being 3, but I thought this game would be close, but I didn't think the Lions were going to be the one to blow the game if they were ahead. So if anything, I thought they'd be the ones playing catch up. I thought the game would be, okay, San Fran's ahead. Detroit's the one playing catch up, and then they get close at the end, but they don't, but they don't catch them. So it's been talked about all week. So I'm not saying anything we all haven't heard, but Dan Campbell, no matter what philosophy he has employed this season with his aggressive style, blew the game. I don't really want to hear anything more than that because I've gotten people on both sides saying, well, it's Dan Campbell's style. This is what got us here. And he's going to play his game. And I don't care what the analytics say. You have to coach the game that's in front of you. And if you want to take risks, like in this game, in game 3 of the season, okay, you have 15 more weeks to make up for it. But in a championship game where your franchise has never been to a Super Bowl in their history, it's not the time nor the place to not take points when you have an opportunity to either extend the lead to a 3-possession game or tie the game, especially when you can feel the momentum was swinging in the 49ers direction. And I don't want to hear that perhaps they didn't trust their kicker, because I've heard this as an argument as well. If your kicker can't make a field goal under 50 yards in today's NFL, you need to get another kicker. Now I think the stats on Badgley was something like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he was like 12 of 18 or 20 in field goals between 40 and 50 yards or something like that this year.
I'm trying to find it, excuse me, now, but I think that would have been the last time he went for it on 4th down, right? That it was like a 48-yard field goal. Maybe he passed on and
one would have been 45 and one would have been like 47 or 48. I think the second one was the longer one.
He was below average in certain metrics when it came to I'm looking now. But see, like this year in the postseason, he was perfect 3 for 3, including a 50+ yarder, 54-yarder he hit. His longest of the regular season, however, was only 41. I can't do it. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at this wrong. His kicking stats regular season. Oh, he wasn't their kicker the whole year, was he? Did somebody get hurt?
Yeah, someone did get hurt in the beginning.
Okay, so that's why
I can't recall his name, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So all right. That makes sense as to why he's not listed as having. Yeah, because he came in Denver in week 14 was his first game, so that's why. Yeah, but I mean, he only had one field goal. His longest regular season was 41. He hit a 54 yarder against the Rams in the wild card. So I mean, but
Yeah.
I guess there was
But I mean,
some certainly a
if
lack of
that's what's
confidence there.
if that's what's playing in his decision making, I mean, well, then that's not a good job with the fact that you have that kicker on your roster, But we don't need to rehash like all that happened. We all know what happened, and I think we can all agree. Much like Green Bay, the Niners caught a few breaks with the doink catch to Ayuk and Gibbs fumble in the next possession, which got them right back in it. But the Lions still had chances to win the game, and if it was coached properly, it's that simple. 6 points gives you 37. The Niners had 34. Now, who knows? Maybe the game takes a different shape, or he misses the field goals, that we're talking about here, or whatever. But he didn't put his team in the best position to win the game. And you give the Niners every opportunity to take the momentum in the second half, which they did, and they made the plays, And Purdy made some good throws, especially on third down. McCaffrey scores the 2 touchdowns. Bosa gets a few sacks, and they blow the 17-point lead in one quarter. And all of a sudden, now you're the one that has to play catch up. Overall, I think Purdy had another rough start, but Lake Green Bay was very good in the second half. Goff definitely played well enough to win. They had a ton of drop passes, like you mentioned earlier, or else his stat line would have looked a lot better if they made those catches. I think Detroit's offensive line played pretty well, but defensively in the second half, they looked a little tired, and San Fran obviously capitalized. So a little bit of blame goes out to the defense. The thing about going for it on fourth down, everyone says, well, like we said, Campbell style, I should have converted on the Reynolds drop. So, okay, he made the right call, but the guy didn't make the catch, right? But if that's the case, you have to take the possibility of a drop, like everything has to go right, into consideration when you decide to go for it on fourth down in a big game. And the field goal analytics would say, and I don't know if it was just Badgley's analytics, would say that that's a 70% make. Going for it on fourth down and 3 or fourth down and 2 or whatever, that's a 50% make. And you're not guaranteed points even if he gets the first down. So I believe any coach that looks at all the risk says to themselves, especially in this kind of game, take the points. It's lower risk. Make the Niners chase you down. Don't give them the opportunity to tie it with 2 touchdowns, because you could have gone ahead by 3 scores, or don't put yourself in a position to go down 2 scores by giving the Niners the ball back after you go for it on fourth down and don't get it. I think he panicked and in the second half, and it cost them the game. I think that I'm not going to say that the Lions outplayed them, but when you look at some of the decisions that were made, if they were made differently, they probably win the game.
Yeah, I mean,
Thoughts?
I agree with a lot of what you said. I mean, for me, where I would have probably been more aggressive of the situations was at the end of the first half, and I
Okay.
don't disagree with his decision to kick the field goal. Now, if Detroit was getting the ball to start the second half, I would have said, go for the touchdown and put your foot on their throat and end the game there. 28-7 plus getting the ball is a lot different than 24-7. Now San Francisco was getting the ball to start the half, so I was okay with him making it a 3-score game at that point. I thought that was okay, and then so 24-7, 3-score game. San Francisco comes down, you hold no field goal, okay, and then you come back down, and that's where the first fourth down, the second time, but the first time they went for it, and you get the drop. And it wasn't an easy catch, but it was a play that could have and should have been made. But again, that's where I would have said, and I don't know what the metrics are. And, they're saying, well, there was, it said go for it. But if it was, 54-46, that's still a coin flip. And to me, you're about halfway through the third quarter at that point. If you can kick a field goal and get it back to a 3-score game, you've played San Francisco even for the first half of the third quarter. And so now they still have to get 3 scores. And so they have to score, 3 straight drives. And you think, well, if we don't turn the ball over, which they did anyway. And then, San Francisco, they can score fast, and they did that because they went 5 plays, 70 something yards after the missed fourth down score. Um, Detroit comes back, fumble first play, San Francisco scores. And then, so that was right. That was the Ayuk. So the drop fourth down, the Ayuk, they dropped the interception. Again, not an easy catch, but I mean, it was in his hands, hits his helmet, and lands in Ayuk's hands. He pulls it in. And then the running back drops the ball, fumbles the ball on the first play in the next drive. So, I mean, like, it was just a series of, and I mean, some of those were just, it wasn't that San Francisco made great plays. I mean, look, Ayuk had to make, it was a tough catch for him to make coming off the rebound, but if the Lions D-back makes that play, it's not there for him to make it. And then at the end of the game, I would have went for the field goal and tied the game, because then there's about 8 minutes left or so in the fourth quarter. At that point, momentum has been all San Francisco, and we know with the Dallas game, I guess as a prior reference, that if they get a chance to let's say, okay, San Francisco scores a touchdown their next drive. If you kick that field goal and you tie it up, Campbell, if they can score a touchdown, and hopefully San Francisco doesn't, make it a 7.5-minute drive and they get the ball with 30 seconds left, he's going for 2 to win the game. And so you might say, well, you don't want to be in that position, but nonetheless, like, Shanahan's not going to go for 2 if they score a touchdown. So you're going to have a chance to win the game as long as they don't chew 7.5 minutes off the clock. So that's why I would have went for the field goal there. I've been like, look, as long as your defense doesn't give up a long drive, you can still control your own destiny in that sense by coming back down, scoring, and then going for 2 like they did against Dallas. So, San Francisco in the first half, they're both sides of the ball looked out of sorts. They were frustrated. The defensive linemen were throwing their helmets, yelling at each other. And then the second half, the offense obviously looked a lot better. The defense looked better, but still didn't look great because, the Lions had a couple of those drives where the fourth downs were not converted in San Francisco territory. But look, the knock against Shanahan was his teams don't come from behind. And it was the fourth quarter, and that got broken with the Green Bay game, and they were down 24-7 at the half in this. And they came back and won. So for whatever reason, now his teams are finding ways to win from behind. So that sort of knock against them, I guess, is not going to be as prevalent in folks' minds going into the Super Bowl, But it's certainly not to take anything away from San Francisco. I think a lot of people saw it as Detroit giving the game away more than San Francisco being the better team. But I think in the end, most people thought San Francisco was a better team before the game, and I don't think that's changed after the game, even though Detroit might have played better for more of the game. So
Yeah.
the best team is going to the Super Bowl from the NFC for sure. But I know there's a lot of frustration being an Eagles fan, and if you're a Lions fan, you've never been to the Super Bowl and you lose a game like that, man. Like, I don't know if I would ever want to watch a football game again, to be honest. So they have my sympathies, but it wasn't the way we drew it up, but San Francisco did get the win in the end. So any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just think he made a mistake also at the end of the game by running the ball on that. I don't know what down it was. It might have been third down that he ran the ball. Then it forces them to take a timeout
Yeah.
at that point, and they're left with 2 timeouts when now they have to go for an onside kick. You can't kick it deep and take your timeouts and see what happens. So, like, again, because all you need is a field goal at that point, because if you do score the touchdown, you throw it in the end zone 4 times, you have your timeouts in your pocket,
Yeah.
and you can force a 3 and out, and then you don't have to rely on the onside kick,
Yeah.
which, again, another coaching blunder. I mean, I will look, and Jason obviously says I'm always killing Purdy. He didn't have a good first half, but again, much like the Green Bay game, when it mattered, he really stepped up and had a really great second half and made a lot of plays with his legs.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I think is a little bit understated in this game is he ran for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 first downs on whatever it was, second and long, third and long, and he got those yards with his legs. He also made that play, which was, I wouldn't call it lucky, but he made that play when he was scrambling around kind of across his body in the middle of the field. I'm not sure if it was Kittle that made that catch. for a first down as well. So when he really needed to make the plays, I got to hand it to him. He was poised. You know, you would think that a guy young like that, and not to say this is probably the biggest game of his life since he didn't really play the NFC Championship game last year. He did come up big, so I'll give him credit for that. And look, I mean, this is 2 games in a row though that the Niners pulled out that they were kind of outplayed and could have lost if certain things went the other way. So it's interesting that they're going to go into a Super Bowl against a KC team that has beaten the best offense in the AFC in the first game in Miami, beat them pretty badly. Probably the second best quarterback in the playoffs in Josh Allen, and the best defense in the league in Baltimore in 3 straight weeks. So you want to talk about like, and it's funny that the line is what it is, you know, but talk about how they got there. Kansas City has gone through a pretty big gauntlet compared to San Fran, who you would have thought if they were this phenomenal team would have been able to take care of both of these teams pretty handily. And they didn't quite do that. You know, they could be sitting at home this week. So be interesting to see how this plays out in the Super Bowl, but I'm sure we'll talk about that next week.
Yeah, well, I won't jump too far in that, but that is one thing I had noted as well. Kansas City pretty much played the 3. Considering that Burrow and Herbert were both hurt by the end of the year, they played the 3 best quarterbacks available in the AFC that they could have matched up with, and the Kansas City defense is giving up a total of 10 points in the second half in those 3 games. And the 49ers have had trouble starting, but they've rallied in the second halves. So, we'll get into, can they afford to do that again? Whatever, blah, blah, blah next week. But it was just an interesting thing. And I forget what Jason said the line was going to be. I think it opened a little lower and then sounded like KC was getting hit early and they moved the line a little bit. Maybe it's coming back a little bit, but
2.5 last time I saw it.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a rematch of a couple years ago. But I mean, look, they're the 2 best teams in each conference, and I'll have a chance to at least win a dinner back if KC goes on and wins. But we shall see. All right, so I won't get too much else into that because we'll have plenty of that saved for next week. So, real quick, not that something we want to talk about, but the big news for this week and then today breaking was Embiid's injury has been confirmed by the team as a meniscus injury. They're still not saying how severe, and he'll be reevaluated in the next couple of days after the weekend. Who knows? Because you can't get a straight answer with injuries on the team. But Embiid obviously missed a couple games, set out with knee soreness, took some heat for that, and then against probably anybody's better judgment, whether it was his or the team's, played against the Warriors, was not well the whole game, and then gets that issue at the end. So I'm just going to say this. If he played because if it was his or the team's decision to make him play so he could qualify for the MVP, because they have the games you got to play now, it's completely stupid. He won the MVP. He got first team All NBA, so he's got those kickers in the contract. And if he played and wasn't feeling well because people were criticizing him on social media or whatever else, say he's ducking Jokic, who cares? Like, I mean, I guess he does, obviously, or somebody does, but it's like this team has played remarkably well when he's in the lineup. And, obviously they're a better team with Embiid than without Embiid, but this is now 4 in a row they've lost, I think, right? And their last losing streak was with Embiid hurt, and Maxi's been hurt a little bit too. But I mean, I really, without knowing right now how long it's going to be, I have to question whether you even try to make a big move at the deadline, especially if it's a win now move, because we don't know yet what his health status is going to be for the rest of the year. I would even lean towards keeping him out longer than you would normally expect, only because, I mean, to me, yes, you're going to want the right matchup, and I don't want to play Boston until the conference semifinals, but I think they've sort of separated themselves right now as the best team in the conference. Milwaukee's having their struggles right now. If you're the 3 or the 6 seed, that to me doesn't make a lot of difference. I'd want to stay out of the 4 or 5 matchup to have to get Boston in the second round, but let Embiid get right, because you've seen how good this team can be when he's healthy this year. And but I just don't know if they're going to rush him back or whatever. But I think it's foolish if either the way people talked or the way, or to try to get him MVP was the reason why he played, because he's not going to have, he's going to have no shot now. But
Yeah.
anyway, your thoughts, Meeker?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, if he was hurt, which, in the past, they have kind of hinted that, oh, he can't play tonight because he's got this or that, and more than likely it really wasn't that, it was just like they were trying to give him some rest. And to have them to force him into again, and you could tell if you watch that Golden State game that he was not right. He just was not right. I mean, he wasn't running, he wasn't jumping or running like at his full speed most of the game. He was missing shots he would normally make. He wasn't really getting back on defense as quickly as he does when he's right. And if it was all because of what you're saying, yeah, I mean it's just unfortunate. And the injury, I mean, if you saw what happened, the guy like kind of fell on his knee, right? So like it was, had that not happened, I guess we're not talking about it being a major thing. But still, I mean, I don't care. Like you said, I don't care. The guy's won MVP in the past. We need him healthy for the playoffs. We don't need this kind of stuff happening with a team that's playing as well as they are. And if you concede a loss here and there, just to make sure that he's healthy when it comes to crunch time at the end of the season and going into the playoffs, who cares? Who cares? I mean, they
Yeah.
instituted this rule this year, right? It was like you can't miss more than whatever it is,
Yeah,
13 games.
I think
Yeah,
it's the
at least
first year.
7
You got to
games,
play 65. Yeah.
65. Yeah, I mean, who cares? Let's just make sure the guy's healthy. And it's definitely irresponsible either on his part because he says he wanted to play,
Right.
or the team's part to make him play in a game when he's not right, just for that reason. And let's just hope that it doesn't really manifest into something worse.
No, I mean, if they sit him for like all of February, like, I mean, it wouldn't bother me at all. I mean, then you got to decide what you do with the trade deadline. But I mean, look, hey, they almost beat Denver. Reed had a great game, and Reed, in the playoffs last year, had good games, gave him good minutes. I mean, when we talked about it way back when, I said, if you're not going to have Harden around, this is almost like a lost season, and they certainly haven't played that way. So I don't want to give up on it. But like this season, I mean, give Maxey credit for playing as well as he has. I was still skeptical of they're one piece away from a championship unless you could get a really big piece, and I didn't think that was going to be available or possible to do at the deadline. Maybe you get a buyout of a Hayward or one of those other guys, like just to who's the guy from Philly that just Lowry. I mean, look, Lowry's pretty much shot, but if he could give you 15 good minutes a game coming off the bench, maybe those are the kind of depth pieces that if Embiid and Maxey are playing as well, and Harris can be a contributor, you can hang in these games in the playoffs. But it just, I mean, look, last year obviously he won to win MVP. That was very important. He got it. Like, okay, you got that's it. Like now it's you should be, it's get to the conference championship, get to the NBA finals, win a championship. MVP should not be a thing that he's concerned about as a primary thing, or the team or whatever. If you play with 64 games, so be it. Who cares? And it just, as a fan, as a season ticket holder, it's very frustrating to see these kind of decisions made when it's like it just didn't. I mean, again, maybe he doesn't injure himself worse if they don't fall on him. But I mean, every year it's something freaky. He catches an elbow. He catches a guy
I
drops on him underneath the basket in like the Brooklyn series last year. Um, I just he's prone to getting these freak injuries. Like it's not like he just gets up out of bed and it's like, oh, I can't walk today. I got out of bed and broke my ankle. Like, no, that's not what happens. But he wasn't getting any height. It was probably his worst game he's looked all year prior to getting hurt. There, you could see just he wasn't getting the elevation on either side of the court. And it was, I mean, I'll say it's malpractice to let him play, but
and the team that they were playing, I mean, traditionally they're an up tempo offense. He's got, that's the type of game that you're running up and down the floor constantly,
yeah,
against the because that's the style of play. I mean, so you got a knee issue, and you're running him around all over the place. I mean, if you want to play him, all right, play him, but play him like 20 minutes, ease him back into the game. I think at that point in the game, he was up to like 30 something minutes.
Yeah, and then I don't know
So
if because it was an ESPN game. I think it's a national game, and obviously the league catches a lot
oh,
of heat of the stars sitting out these games. But I
ridiculous.
mean, like this wasn't it's a rest game. Like
So
it's a recovery.
best for the NBA. You do what's best for the
He's
team. You
hurt.
don't do
Like
what's
I
hey,
don't know. And especially with your it was a back to back, right? So like everybody else played the night before,
yeah,
and it's like just they're gonna be tired. Even if Embiid feels if he felt 100% is one thing, but like you weren't gonna get 100%. The rest of the team is already tired, and it would have been a hard game to win anyway, like if he was close to 100%. So it was just the wrong decision to make. Can't stress that enough. And I don't think it was Nurse that was the one that made that decision, but whoever did, it was just I don't know, awful. And
yeah,
I'll leave it at that.
yeah. You should have honestly. They shouldn't even taken him on the trip.
No. I
Yeah,
mean, the weird thing is that I guess he took a fall maybe in his last game before the Denver game, but it was, you know, and they got fined today, I think, $75,000 because he wasn't on the injury report. And then it was like minutes before the tip off, like you were saying earlier, like, oh, Embiid's not playing, his knee hurts or whatever. And that's fine. Like, if that's really the truth, which I didn't believe he's trying to duck Jokic, but okay, sit him out. I mean, it sucks because everybody wanted to see like the MVPs, but they had that matchup in a really good game a couple of weeks before. But if he's really that hurt, he's that hurt. Like, that's fine. But then like you don't play him in that game, and then you play him at like quarter speed in the Warriors game, and like I don't know, I just
yeah,
baffles me. But we don't get paid to make those decisions anyway.
yeah. It's
What we
frustrating.
also don't get paid to do is this podcast, and we're almost at an hour. So believe it or not, we've gone longer than we thought, but we certainly have a lot to say and a lot of information to give out to the people. So I know you're all not disappointed by that. Anyway, we'll wind it down. Any thoughts, spot plays, anything else interesting from this week or going into next week you have, Meeker?
Now I'm gonna save it for next week, and take a real hard look at this game. I really don't know where I'm going with it quite yet.
I'm leaning, but it's a game where I could easily change my mind. I think for sure. It should be a good game. I don't necessarily see it being a blowout. But
No,
it's going to be a very polarizing game. I think with
I mean it's the game that I think it's the game that most of America did not want to see.
yeah,
Because we've seen it before, and you had the darling Lions, and they haven't ever been to a Super Bowl, so obviously America wanted to see that. And I don't know that America wanted to see Baltimore over Kansas City, but we've seen this, Kansas City team too much, and the whole Swift thing, and from a sports
yeah,
from a sports person, from a sports fan's perspective, like what I've rather seen two different teams in there in Baltimore and Detroit, but this is probably when I talk about the better matchup of the better teams. Obviously, it ended up that the two better teams are in the Super Bowl, and they deserve to be
yeah. I
there.
mean, it's
So
not a fresh matchup by any sense of the imagination, but hey, look, these are the and we were saying end of November, beginning of December, like Casey's not going to be long for the playoffs this year, and
now,
shame on us for doubting them, because they took out the three other best teams in the conference on the way to another Super Bowl appearance, and it might be boring, but I guess it almost still doesn't it pales in comparison to the run the Patriots put together, and they obviously haven't had that much time to win that many championships or go to 10 straight conference championships or whatever Brady ended up doing that last run there, but um it's still pretty unprecedented. Like, it's very rare to see a team consistently get back there like they have been. And like I said, fourth in 5 years or whatever it's been, and Mahomes has been a starter. That's better than Brady did starting, and Brady won three. Mahomes only got two so far, but it took I think Brady had to be in the league 10 years before he got to like his fourth Super Bowl or whatever, or fifth, I'm sorry, or fourth. No, fourth was the undefeated
yeah,
year.
it's
But
amazing.
anyway, like, he's in the conversation for the GOAT. I don't have him there yet, but he's got a lot of play left, so we'll see. But anyway, we'll wrap it up there. This was episode 92 of Broad Street Hustle. Maybe not the best and hopefully not the worst, but we'll catch you back here next week with Tommy and Jason back talking about the Super Bowl, prop bets. Hopefully, a lot of good discussion and a lot of interesting things for you guys to lay some money down on, make some money on the Super Bowl. So until then, we will talk to you next week.
Good night.